Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter, lead content strategist for the Monday Morning Quarterback. He is the Monday Morning Quarterback, and he's look at the paperwork here I got on all of these quarterbacks here. Man, this is a deep dive. I mean, he even went to Devin Leary at Kentucky and Washington State's Cameron Ward, Deion Sanders' son. There's a lot of quarterbacks, but we start with Caleb Williams at the top. Are there any negatives with Caleb Williams?
It's hard to find one, Dan. I mean, we're really at the point now where it feels like this is encroaching on that Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence category. And I've been covering the league for almost 20 years. And I think over my lifetime, there are four guys that are sort of in a different category from a prospect standpoint at that position: John Elway, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence. That doesn't mean anything as far as what they became in the league, but just how they were seen coming out of college. And I think the lack of flaws with Caleb Williams, and of course we're going to pick him apart, and he's going to have all the pressure on him this fall because of that. But just as far as where they are, going into their last year and then where they should be coming out of their last year in college, that's where Caleb Williams is. And Drake May is really well thought of too, but everybody I've talked to said there is a gap. It's Caleb Williams 1, gap, Drake May 2, gap, and then the pack. And so Caleb Williams is seen that way as the sort of generational prospect that Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck were over the last 15 years.
You are joining us. You're on vacation, and we appreciate you joining us. But I'm looking in the background there. You got the water, and there's some kids there. Are those your kids?
So my daughter's right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's right there.
I wasn't sure.
And my kid, I think my son's trying to make air by driving as fast as he can by the shot on his bike.
Yeah, I just saw him. I saw him zoom by you there. But that picture is real. The water is real behind you there.
Water is real. Yeah, the boats are real. All of it. Todd actually, I think it was Todd, hooked me up here, and we actually had a less scenic shot. And then I said, "Well, hey, how about this?" So this was actually his choice, not mine.
I like it.
So I'm not chest pounding or anything else, because for everybody who's out there thinking I'm bragging, my summer is officially over in about a week. So I'm just getting what I can get while I can get it.
Give me some other names that we should keep an eye on this upcoming season. That, yes, Caleb Williams is one, Drake May would be two, and then who's going to be that third quarterback off the board?
Sure. Like one name that kind of kept coming up when I talked to more people was Bo Nix at Oregon, who, I think was seen as a very flawed player playing in a flawed offense at Auburn. And I think he opened a lot of eyes with what he did last year at Oregon, and being able to do that again, even though he lost his offensive coordinator and even though he lost some offensive linemen in his sixth year in college this year, I think could get him in the first round discussion. And I think he's a little closer to that than some of the other guys. Now, there are guys that I think have more talent than him, and two of them would be Quinn Ewers at Texas and J.J. McCarthy at Michigan, where those guys have talent to potentially go in the first round. The question is, are they going to develop like they need to develop? Like they aren't finished products yet. When Trent Dilfer, who, and as sees all these kids from high school on up and has seen a lot of these guys through the Elite 11 program since they were teenagers, said Quinn Ewers has like a Jeff George arm, right? And I think when you watch Texas on Saturdays, you can see that. So, but Ewers is still pretty raw. So playing another year for Steve Sarkisian at Texas, does he get there where he's the third quarterback off the board? J.J. McCarthy's another one where he was up and down at points last year, but he won his first 12 starts at Michigan. So is he in the conversation? So I think those three names, Nix, McCarthy, Ewers, would be in the conversation. Jordan Travis at Florida State's another one. And I think that's what's so intriguing about this year's class is you got a clear one, you got a clear two, and then you've got like this clump of players where there's real talent, and they're going to kind of duke it out for draft position over the course of the next 6 months.
I talked to a talent evaluator. This is after the end of last season, and he said he would lump in Michael Penix at Washington and put him in there. And I think he's been around maybe 5 years. He transferred from Indiana, but
I think 6. I think
6 years.
And that's the COVID thing, though. Like that's what happens. Like Jordan Travis is. Well, I said I think Nix is 5 years.
Okay.
But Jordan Travis is 6 years, right? And Penix is 6 years, and that's like the COVID effect. Is the guy's got the extra years of eligibility, and Penix is interesting because I think he's got some physical ability, but it's sort of like Nix a little bit in that like a lot of people didn't like his Indiana tape. And then he went to play for Kalen DeBoer at Washington. And I think there's that thing, like that you hear sometimes, is it the offense or is it the quarterback? And Bo Nix is going to have the opportunity to answer those questions this year at Oregon because he's losing his offensive coordinator who went to Arizona State to be the head coach. The question is with Penix, I think it's going to be a little bit more of, can he dispel all the questions that he had hanging over him at Indiana, playing in a little bit of a different type of offense at Washington? But there is some talent there. And he'd be another one. I should have thrown him in the mix, but that sort of tells you how big the group is too, is that there's a half dozen guys who I think have an opportunity to maybe play their way into the first round discussion, or at the very least into like the top 100 discussion.
What about Deion Sanders' son?
Yeah. So he's interesting because, he was a dominant player at Jackson State. And now what we're seeing more with these guys is they have the opportunity to transfer up. And so, now you're going to get to see him in the Pac-12 playing at Colorado. The word that came up with Deion's kid was the same word that came up with Drake May, which was smooth. Like he looks really natural playing the position, and now playing against better competition at Colorado, we should get a look at how he looks when everybody else has got the same level of ability that he does. Because remember, he was a guy who, coming out of high school, had the opportunity to play at that level, but wanted to play for his dad. And so we haven't seen him in the context of like the FBS, like Power 5 level. And now we're going to get the chance to see him do that at Colorado. And and the cool thing about it is we're going to get to see him do it at Colorado, where in a lot of games, they're going to be at a talent deficit. So NFL evaluators are going to get the chance to look at him and see what it's like when he doesn't have a talent advantage going against the other team.
Albert Breer joining us from vacation. He's the Monday morning quarterback. NFL free agent updates? Anything?
Yeah. I assume you're talking about the big two, which we've all been obsessing over the last month because there's not a whole lot else to talk about. But DeAndre Hopkins and Dalvin Cook would be the two. I think both their situations are somewhat similar in that the money hasn't been what they wanted it to be. And I think the hope is as you get closer to training camp, maybe a contender like looks at its roster in their pre-camp meetings and says, we need to add a body there. Or somebody has an injury earlier in camp and they decide that they need to act with some urgency and up the ante a little bit. Obviously with Hop, like the teams have been Tennessee and New England, and those teams haven't been willing to go to the financial point that he wants somebody to go to get him. Now, I think he'd be willing to go at a little bit of a discount to a Buffalo or a Kansas City, but that ship sort of sailed going back to the draft when, the Odell Beckham deal got done, and that sort of poisoned the well on the negotiations with Hopkins with those two teams. So, like, for example, Kansas City's in a situation where they gave the money they were going to give to Hopkins to Donovan Smith, their new left tackle. And so they decided we still need a body at receiver. They draft Rashee Rice in the second round out of SMU. So, like, coming out of spring now, do they look at it when they have their meetings before camp and say, we don't want to rely as much on Rice as a rookie, so we need to go and get a DeAndre Hopkins. And, oh, by the way, if we get a deal done with Chris Jones, that's going to free up some cap space for us to do it. So I think the Chiefs would be a contender to get back in there. Buffalo, I think just because of the Stephon Diggs situation, I think they'd be a no. They were cognizant of that even before everything kind of blew up in June, that like they really had to be cognizant of where the ball was going and that Steph needed a certain amount of touches. And Hopkins is sort of a volume player. So I don't think that they'll get back in it. And then with Cook, I still think the team to watch with him is the Jets. I know he's got an interest in them, and, looking at where they are from a roster standpoint, bringing Breece Hall back from injury and having the opportunity to be a little flexible as far as giving him his time to come back from his ACL and maybe getting him in a better place in October rather than rushing him back in September, and still, doing your best to act with urgency to win the games in September because you are in a win now situation with Aaron Rodgers would make all the sense in the world. So I think the Jets would be the team to watch with Cook. We'll see what happens as we get closer to the camp with both those guys if more contenders throw their hats in the ring. And I know that was a complicated answer, but I'm trying to recap the last 3 months with both those guys for you.
Yeah, and I agree with you on Dalvin Cook with the Jets. And I thought about Dalvin Cook with the Cowboys with Tony Pollard coming back from a broken leg. That, the Jets are in an a win now mode. The Cowboys are always in that. And I just think, the contributions of both of those running backs, that you give them a little extra time instead of kind of expediting their rehab process and bringing those guys in. But I don't know what happens when they get healthy, and now you're sharing, touches and how that works there. But it feels like
Well, I think
Dalvin. Yeah.
I mean, Dan, I think with the Jets, it's like every game counts now. You know what I mean? Like, not that it doesn't for other teams, but like if you're the Jets, it's like, no, we're in it for now. Like, we're in it for now. We don't know what 2024 is going to look like, what 2025 is going to look like. And I think if you talk to like Buccaneers people, they would tell you we were all in for every game, and it was the right thing to do because we competed for championships for 3 years and we won one, right? And that's sort of where the Jets are right now. So you can't throw away week 1 or week 2 to be judicious with a single player. So if you want to still be judicious with that single player, how do you make it work? Well, you get somebody to replace him for those 2 weeks,
Yeah.
And so I think that's why that sets up as sort of a perfect situation if they could work the numbers out. And again, like both these guys, money's a factor with both of them. Like those guys aren't going to go take the league minimum to chase a ring.
Before I let you go and you end your reign as the worst dad ever as you're doing a live report while your kids are riding your bikes near the beach there, I wondered about this with Greg Popovich. He signed a 5-year deal after they get Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio. I'm wondering if there's a quarterback that will keep Belichick. Let's say he got Drake May or Caleb Williams. Is there a player that would keep him in that job, almost energize him, sort of the way Victor Wembanyama has done Greg Popovich?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I don't know, because I do think that the Shula record is sort of looming over all of this. Yeah. And I believe he's 19 wins away, which puts you like borderline, like based on the team they have, it's a toss up. Does he make it there by the end of 2024? And like, everybody I know that knows Bill really well says like his juice for the job hasn't gone anywhere. Like he still loves it. And he's found a way to balance it where, like I think he can still do the things that a lot of 70-year-olds, 75-year-olds want to do in retirement and still be a coach, you know what I mean? And still do all of that. And so I think wins and losses are a part of it. And yeah, I mean, I think if a certain level of quarterback came along, or if Mac Jones somehow got to that level, now I don't think most people would tell you that's in the cards, but if like he had another quarterback at that level, I think it would certainly be something that would be tempting for him to stay, because I do think that like he's gotten to a point, and I'm sure it's the same with Pop, where like all the things you want to do, in your golden years, like in your 70s and your 80s, like those guys have sort of figured out how to do that and do the job, And so I think that that's like a little thing that like has made it so he could go from the guy who said, you won't find me out there like Marv Levy in my 70s coaching to now being that guy. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's what allowed him to do it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think if he looks at it and says, I could win 2 championships in 5 years with the quarterback that I have, I certainly think that would be something that could entice him to stay. And like on paper, at least looking forward at it now, like a Caleb Williams and Drake May would be that guy. Now, the problem is you're going to need to be absolutely awful to get them. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't like if they're that bad, does Robert Kraft keep them around?
Yes,
you know what
I wondered about that. Go back to being a great dad there on vacation. I hope you can find your children and
I think my attention horse son just like skidded by. For the last
I saw
time.
him, but I got to find your daughter. I'm looking for her in the picture there.
Well, there are 3 of them. I think our middle may have decided he didn't want to be on the camera today. So
thank you, Albert.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
That's Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter, and he is the Monday Morning Quarterback.